In the dark sky of planet Viridian, 3 moons hung silently. The air was cold. The wind whispered stories of pain. And deep under the stone towers of the breeding halls, a young alien girl named Salira sat alone. She was not like the others. Her people, the Virelians, were known for their beauty and strength. The females were bred in special labs, trained to produce strong offspring. Hips, height, bone structure, everything was measured, and Salira failed. They said her hips were too narrow, her spine too curved, her body wrong for breeding. They marked her forehead with a black line, the mark of the unfit. She was just 19 cycles old. When they took her name from the family list and sent her to the labor camps, no one cried, no one spoke. Not even her mother looked back. In her world, love did not exist. Only usefulness. Now, she carried metal crates in the icy caves of Mining Zone 14. Her fingers bled, her back ached. And still, she moved, quiet, numb, broken. But the universe was not done with her. Far above Viridian, a human battleship floated in orbit. Its name, Starfire 1. Captain Morgan Hawley stared at the screen. Red dots blinked across the map, signs of life trapped under the mining zone. His mission was to rescue human prisoners from the alien world. But the signal showed more than just humans. Something's not right down there, he said. Hours later, the human soldiers landed. The rescue mission had begun. Salira was carrying rocks when the explosion shook the ground. Lights flashed, voices shouted, strange words. Unknown uniforms. Laser guns. She dropped the crate and hid behind a rock. She saw the humans, taller, armored, moving fast. One of them turned. His eyes met hers. It was him. Captain Morgan saw her, small, shaking, with eyes full of fear and something else. Silence. She was not like the others. She wasn't attacking. She wasn't running. She was waiting to be hurt. He raised his hand slowly. "It's okay," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't understand his words, but his voice was soft. His eyes were kind. For the first time in her life, someone looked at her, not with judgment, not with disgust, but with care. A loud crash echoed. The ceiling above cracked. Rocks fell. She tried to move but slipped. Morgan rushed and caught her in his arms just before the rock hit. She was light, fragile, like a bird. As he held her, she didn't fight. She didn't speak. But tears rolled down her cheek, and she didn't know why. Later, inside the ship, the medical team scanned her. "She's not human," one officer said. "She's Virelian," another replied. "They don't let their women out of breeding halls unless." Morgan looked at the mark on her forehead. He didn't ask. But in his heart, he knew. He brought her food. She didn't eat. He sat near her. She didn't talk. Finally, after hours of silence, she looked at him and said in broken words, "Why? You saved me?" Morgan leaned back and spoke gently. "Because you deserve to be saved." Her hands trembled. "No one ever say that." He smiled sadly. "Well, someone should have." She didn't know what it meant, but she liked how he said it, like she was real. Like she mattered. In the corner of the room, she saw a small mirror. She walked to it slowly. She touched her face, her eyes, her marked forehead. Then, quietly, she whispered, "I am broken." Morgan stood and walked to her. He didn't touch her, just stood behind and spoke. "No, you're not broken." He raised his hand, slowly, and gently wiped the black mark from her forehead with a warm cloth. She looked at him through the mirror, and for the first time, she saw herself differently. Not as a tool, not as trash, but as someone sacred. That night, she slept on the medical bed. Morgan sat nearby, not leaving her side. In the darkness, Salira whispered one word before sleep took her. "Thank you." And somewhere deep in the stars, destiny shifted. The girl who was wrong for breeding had found someone who saw her not as a body, but as a soul. Her story was just beginning. Space was quiet, too quiet. Captain Morgan Hawley stood at the window of Starfire 1, staring into the black sea of stars. Behind him, the ship moved like a silent guardian. But inside Morgan's mind, one image kept returning. Her face, her eyes. That broken whisper, "Thank you." He had rescued many lives in his time, soldiers, children, diplomats. But Celera was different. She hadn't asked for help. She hadn't screamed. She had simply accepted pain, like it was normal. That haunted him more than war. Below them, planet Viridian was in chaos. News had spread. A Varelian female had escaped the labor camp with a human. The elders were furious. To them, it was an insult, a stain, a violation of their ancient code. "She's not just unfit now," said Morgan's second in command. "She's forbidden." Morgan didn't blink. "Then they'll have to come through me." In the medical bay, Celera sat near a glowing panel. She watched the stars from the window, wide-eyed. She had never seen stars from this angle. Her planet always kept her underground, in cages, in cold caves, in rooms with no sky. Now the sky was all around her. She pressed her hand to the glass and whispered, "Is this freedom?" Behind her, Morgan entered quietly. She didn't turn, but she felt his presence. He stood next to her and asked gently, "Do you want to go back?" She closed her eyes and said one word, "No." They walked the ship together. People stared. Some whispered. Some frowned. A few soldiers didn't like the idea of keeping an alien on board, especially one marked as unfit by her own kind. But Morgan stood beside her, always calm, always firm. "She's not their slave anymore," he said. "She's under my protection." He gave her a small translator device, and slowly her speech improved. She asked many questions about Earth, about humans, about music and laughter, and one night she asked the most unexpected question. "Do humans love?" Morgan paused. "Yes, we do. Even the broken ones?" He smiled softly. "Especially the broken ones." But peace didn't last. A warning alarm lit up across the ship. 3 Virelian attack ships had entered orbit. A fast message came through. "Return the female, or be destroyed." Morgan's crew panicked. Some officers advised surrender. "She's not worth a war." One shouted. Morgan's voice cut through the room like steel. "She's worth everything." He turned to Celera. "You don't have to stay," he said, "but I won't hand you over." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw what no one else had ever shown her: honor, loyalty, love. In the dark corner of the ship, Celera made a choice. She stood tall. Her voice was still soft, but her words were clear. "I'm not going back. I'd rather die free than live as nothing." Morgan nodded. "Then we fight." The ship moved into battle position. Celera watched in awe as humans, so small compared to Virelians, prepared to defend her like she was a queen. Guns loaded, shields raised, and in that moment she realized, they don't see me as broken, they see me as worth protecting. She was no longer just an exile. She was chosen. She had never been touched like that before. Not in her world. Not by her kind. Not with care. In Viridian culture, a female's body belonged to the system, not to herself. Touch was for examination, for control, for breeding. But when Captain Morgan held her, it was different. The battle had ended. The enemy ships were forced back. Morgan's crew had protected her, not because she was powerful, but because she was worth something. No medals, no rewards. Just one truth: she mattered. But now the bigger battle had begun inside Celera. For the first time in her life, she was free. But who was she without the cage? In the silence of the Starfire's observation deck, Salira stood barefoot, staring out into the galaxy. Her fingers touched the cold glass. Behind her, Morgan entered. He didn't speak, he just stood beside her, giving her space. After a while, she said, "Your people treat me like I'm real." Morgan nodded slowly. "You are. But I don't know how to be real." Morgan looked at her. Not her body, not her past, but her soul. "Then let's learn together." That evening, Salira sat in the crew's common room. She watched humans laugh, eat together, argue, play games. No ranks, no marks, no judgments. A small child from the engineering crew approached her, holding a music player. "Want to listen?" Salira hesitated, then nodded. She placed the earpiece in, and music filled her head, soft, warm, full of something she didn't have a word for. "What is this feeling?" she asked Morgan. "Peace," he said. Later, Salira returned to the med bay. Alone. She looked in the mirror again. She removed the bandage from her forehead. The black mark was almost gone. Only a faint shadow remained, but inside, another mark was fading too, the one placed in her heart by years of rejection. That night, she had a nightmare. Chains, screams, hands pulling her back to the breeding chamber. She cried out in her sleep. And then a hand touched hers, not to restrain, but to comfort. Morgan had rushed to her room. He didn't wake her with force. He just held her hand and whispered, "You're safe now. You're not there anymore." She woke with tears in her eyes. But this time, she didn't hide them. She turned toward him and whispered, "Will you stay?" He nodded and sat beside her bed. "Always." In the dark, she reached out, not because she was weak, but because she wanted to feel something good. Morgan gently held her hand, nothing more. Not for desire. Not for power, but for connection. And in that one small moment, her body became her own, not a machine, not a failure, not a curse, but sacred, because someone had touched her like she was precious, not useful. Days passed. Her speech grew clearer, her eyes brighter, her steps lighter. Morgan taught her to read, to laugh, to choose. She taught him about Varelian pain, their cold rules, and how silence can be louder than screams. They shared food, stories, silence, and one night, in the glowing greenhouse of the ship, surrounded by earth flowers growing in space soil, Salira asked, "If I was human, would I be beautiful?" Morgan didn't hesitate. "You're beautiful now." She looked down, her voice cracked. "Even with the wrong hips?" He stepped closer, slowly, gently, carefully. He placed a hand near her waist, not touching, just hovering. "Who decided what's right?" "Your body isn't wrong. Their system is." Then he did something no Varelian male had ever done. He bowed his head and whispered, "Thank you for surviving." Salira didn't know what to say. So she did something even more powerful. She placed her hand on his chest and said, "Thank you for seeing me." Before she met him, Salira thought freedom was just a word. Now, freedom was a feeling, warm, terrifying, and alive in her chest. But no one told her that freedom came with something even harder: choices. The message came at midnight, encrypted, urgent. From a hidden source deep in the Viridian system. The voice was cold, familiar, and full of poison. "Return to us, Salira. You are not human. You belong to your kind. Your actions are dishonor. Your presence is a disease." Then silence. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, staring at the blinking message, her fingers frozen in mid-air. Morgan entered the room. He knew the moment he saw her face. "They found us," she nodded slowly. "They want me back." Morgan stepped closer, voice calm but firm. They don't want you. They want control. There's a difference. Celera turned to him. But maybe. I should go. Why? Her voice cracked. Because your people are now in danger. Because of me. In that moment, she felt it again. The weight of being called wrong. Less dangerous. It followed her like a shadow. Morgan reached out. He didn't grab her. He never forced. Just a soft voice. You didn't start this war. But you can end it. By choosing you. Later, the crew held a private meeting. Some were afraid. One officer whispered, "We should hand her over. One life to save 100. Another replied, "She saved lives too. She's more than just a body." Silence filled the room. Everyone looked to her, not as a thing to be traded, but as a person to decide, and that was the most terrifying part. She had the power to choose. That night, she stood on the ship's balcony alone. She stared into space where her home world glowed. Like a cold jewel. She spoke to it like an old enemy. You called me unfit, but I was never yours. Behind her, Morgan appeared, quiet as always. He stood beside her, not speaking. After a long silence, she asked, "If I stay, your people may die. And if you go, you will." She looked up at him. "What would you do?" Morgan answered, without blinking, "I choose the future, not the cage." She nodded. Then whispered, "Then help me build that future." The next morning, she stood before the crew. No longer small. No longer silent. She wore a simple robe, the translator fixed to her collar. She looked each crew member in the eye. "I am not human, but I was treated better by you than my own people ever did. You gave me food, kindness, safety, and choice." She paused. "So I make my choice now. I will not return. I will not bow. If they want me, they'll have to face me." The crew erupted in support. Cheers. Fists in the air. She wasn't just a rescued alien anymore. She was one of them. That evening, Morgan found her in the greenhouse. She was planting a single seed in the soil, something she'd never done before. "What is it?" he asked. "A tree," she replied. "It grows slowly, but once it raises, it never bends again." He smiled. She looked up at him. "I was born for a system, trained to obey. But now, I choose who I become." Then she added, "Thank you for giving me the one thing I never had, a future." The seed was still in the soil. It hadn't sprouted, but Celera touched the earth every morning as if willing it to grow. "You will rise," she whispered, "like I did." But somewhere in the darkness of space, they were coming. Far from Starfire 1, deep in the red mist of the nebula graveyard, 3 Viridian warships flew without lights, silent, deadly, unmarked. Inside them were not soldiers, but something far worse, trackers, born without names, trained without mercy. They did not take prisoners. They hunted, retrieved, erased. And now they had one target, the unfit female and the human who corrupted her. On the Starfire, everything felt too quiet. Too still. Morgan felt it first, a heaviness in the air. "Storm's coming," he muttered. Celera sensed it too. Her hands trembled near the soil. Not from fear, but from something ancient inside her. Something her people had tried to erase. Instinct. That night, the first signal hit. A warning beacon shredded. A nearby cargo ship vanished. Then, one of Starfire's scout drones sent its final message before going dark. Unmarked ships. Stealth tech. Fast. Morgan stood in the command deck, jaw tight. "They're not warning us. They're hunting us." Celera stood by the screen, watching red dots move closer. She turned to Morgan. "They'll never stop." "Then we don't stop either," he said. She looked at him, eyes steady. "Let me fight." He hesitated. Salira, there. Killers. So was my silence, she replied. I know how they move. I know how they think. I was raised in their shadows. She was right. The Starfire's weapons were strong, but the trackers didn't attack like warriors. They attacked like wolves. Quiet, fast, from the dark, one by one. The outer decks were breached, one crew member gone. Then another, not a single sound. Salira walked the halls, listening. She didn't panic. She felt their pattern. She knew their rhythm. And then, for the first time, she said something no one expected. I was trained for this. Morgan turned to her, stunned. What? She didn't blink. Before they called me unfit. I was trained as a candidate for the breeding guard. My body didn't meet their standards, but my mind was built for survival. The crew watched her take command of the shadows. She closed her eyes. She walked barefoot. She laid traps in places the humans never thought of. She didn't just escape the system. She was now outsmarting it. But then they came for Morgan. 3 trackers. Blades, no words. No mercy. The ambush hit fast. Salira heard the fight and ran. The door to the engine bay slammed shut behind her. She saw him on the floor, bleeding, still fighting. She didn't hesitate. She screamed. But it wasn't a sound of fear. It was the scream of someone who finally realized she had something to lose. She moved like a ghost and struck like fire. 1 tracker fell. Then another. The last one lunged, but she didn't flinch. She blocked, twisted, and drove the enemy's own blade into his chest. It was over in 30 seconds. She stood there, breath sharp, eyes burning, covered in someone else's blood. Morgan looked up at her. You saved me. She dropped to her knees beside him. You saved me first. He took her hand, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a survivor. She felt like a warrior. The crew rushed in, alarms still blinking, but Morgan's voice was calm. She's not just part of this crew now. She's part of this fight. Somewhere in the soil of the greenhouse, the seed cracked. The first green stem pushed upward. It had begun. The greenhouse was burning. The seedling she planted, the one she whispered to every morning, had turned to ash. Smoke curled through the shattered glass dome, and Salira stood barefoot in the soil, her eyes not blinking, her heart refusing to break, because she had already lost everything once. She would not lose again. Not this time. Had started hours ago, with blood, fire, and betrayal. A distress call had pulled Starfire 1 into a decoy trap, a drifting Viridian medical ship. Faint life signals. And so S. Morgan had ordered the approach. They didn't know until it was too late. A virus. Silent, fast, engineered. Not for machines, not for weapons. For minds. It didn't kill the body. It stole control. One by one, crew members turned eyes. Glowing faint blue. Calm voices. Unnatural stillness. They weren't human anymore. They were being overwritten. In the command deck, Morgan's hand gripped the edge of the console, face pale, lips trembling. It's in me, he looked at her. There was fear in his voice, but not for himself. Salira, run. Lock yourself in the escape pod. But she didn't move. She watched him struggle, fighting the invasion, shaking against it, still trying to protect her. And something inside her cracked open. Not like before. Not pain. Something new. Purpose. She placed her hand on his heart and whispered, I will not run from the one who never ran from me. In her mind, old memories woke up. Whispers from her childhood. Drills from the guard. Forbiddance. Instincts. She had never passed the physical test. But she had memorized the override codes. She had studied them in secret. Back then, for pride. Now, for survival. She turned to the infected crew. They moved toward her like a single machine. She held up her wrist device, pulsing with a deep red light. You think I was born to breed? Her voice was low. I was. Born to fight. She triggered a shock pulse through the ventilation, not enough to kill, just enough to pause the virus. 30 seconds. That's all she had. She sprinted through fire and smoke. To the data core. To the source of the infection. Behind the final door, a Varelian elder, masked and wired into the system. He turned slowly. You, the broken one. No, she said, raising the blade Morgan gave her long ago. Not broken, reforged. They fought, no elegance. No form. Just truth and fury. She was faster, smarter, desperate, but he was stronger. Wired into the ship. He knocked her down. Her ribs cracked. He raised the neural rod, aimed at her skull. And then Morgan's voice, weak but steady, came through her earpiece. Don't let them take you again. She reached deep, inside. Not for hate. But for the memory of kindness, of laughter. Of music in her ears for the first time, of her hand in his. She surged upward, slammed the blade through the elder's control node. The lights dimmed. The virus broke. The infected crew collapsed to their knees, gasping, confused, alive. The elder was gone. In the silence that followed, Celera dropped to the floor. Breathing. Bleeding. Alive. Morgan found her there. He knelt beside her, arms shaking, still recovering. You saved the ship, she coughed and smiled. You showed me how. Later, in the greenhouse, she returned to the soil. The fire had taken the first seed, but she placed a new one in its place. She looked at Morgan, now resting beside her. You said I had strength. I never believed it. But today, I do. She pressed her fingers into the dirt. Let it grow. No one ever thought she'd return. Not alive. Not free. Not on her own terms. But now, Celera stood at the edge of Viridian's high chamber, not as a servant, not as a shadow, but as something her people had no word for, unnowned, the journey. Back had taken 7 rotations. 7 days of silence and starlight. 7 days of wondering if she was making a mistake. But truth demands to be spoken, where the lie was born, and the lie had always lived here, in this place of polished stone and soulless law. They had summoned her, not to apologize, but to silence. Her. Come alone, the message said. No human, no ship, no games. Morgan hadn't wanted her to go, but she had looked him in the eyes and said, You taught me how to stand. Now let me show them I can walk alone. The doors to the chamber opened. 12 Varelian elders sat on thrones, eyes cold, robes heavy with tradition. One elder rose. The unfit returns. What does she seek? Celera did not bow. She did not kneel. She stepped forward in silence, her voice steady. Not forgiveness. Not approval. Only a hearing. They laughed. She did. Not flinch. You called me wrong, she said. But I saved a ship. I saved a crew. I saved myself. You bred bodies. I built bonds. You measure hips. I measured hope. One elder rose in anger. You were never sacred. She took a breath and whispered, No, not by your rules. But a human held me like I was. He touched me like I was worth more than my function, and that made me sacred. The chamber fell silent. Even the walls seemed to lean in. She pulled a small object from her belt, the broken piece of her old forehead tag, the symbol of unfit. She placed it on the floor. This mark used to define me. Then she crushed it under her heel. Now it reminds me I survived it. They offered her exile again. They offered her silence. They offered her to disappear. She smiled softly. No need, I already belong somewhere. And it's not here. Back on Starfire 1, Morgan stood in the greenhouse, tending to the small seedling, the second one. It had sprouted. Gently, quietly. But there it was, Alive. The door opened. He turned. She stood there, backlit by soft ship lights, dust on her boots, a slight cut on her cheek, and fire in her eyes. He didn't speak. She walked toward him. And said only, "I chose." He reached for her hand, but this time she was the one who pulled him close. Not because I was saved, but because I finally knew I was worth saving. They stood under the growing tree. No marks, no chains, no lies, just two beings, one human, one Varelian, and one truth. Bond is stronger than breeding, and love is the most sacred act of all.